Round 6 of the candidates tournament in Khanty-Mansiysk turned out to be full of drama. First of all, let's take a look at the game between Vasilin Topalov and Vladimir Kramnik, two old rivals. It's a queen's gambit. Kramnik is black. Standard variation with bishop f4. Topalov chose to close the position with c5. Now this is a very well-known variation, and black can choose between playing on the king's side or playing more on the queen's side with c6 and b6 and so on, and in that way to free this bishop. But Kramnik chose knight h5. Now it's a move he has employed before, so just trying to get rid of that powerful bishop before white provides an escape square for it. And here, well, the standard move is just to play bishop d3 and allow black to exchange off that bishop on f4. But here Topalov played an unusual move, bishop e5. It has been seen before. But well, let's go on. c6. So and now bishop d3 looks pretty normal. I think, generally white would be pretty happy to get a position like this. So the knight is now hit, and you can probably support that knight on e5 with f4 and start to get some kind of initiative on the king side. So Kramnik declined to exchange. He played g6 in this position, blocking out the bishop. This position has actually been seen before in a game from 1896 between Steinitz and Chigorin, two of the greats of that era. And Chigorin played f6 and then played f5, and that's not a bad continuation. You keep the bishop in the sights of the knight, you block out the bishop on d3. I mean, what Kramnik did was, you could say, almost similar, actually. And here, well, a normal move would be perhaps to castle, but an extraordinary move from Topi. I mean, I'm not exactly sure of the purpose of this move. It looks really bizarre, actually. Of course, in some positions we'd like to get in g4 and h5 and open up the h-file, fine. But it's hard to achieve that. Well, let's see how Kramnik dealt with that. He played f5. I think it's a good move. Locks out the bishop and prevents any nonsense with g4. The bishop dropped back. And here I think Kramnik made a poor decision. He played b6. I think he perhaps should have taken the bull by the horns and just whipped this pawn off. And there is no obvious refutation of this move because it's not really possible to attack on the h-file. Of course, white can take off that dangerous dark squared bishop, and he can perhaps hope at some stage to use his dark squared bishop. At the moment there's a pin, and so it's not so easy for white to develop his initiative. But of course it's risky taking this pawn. But you could also play f4. I mean, this move I quite like, actually. Kramnik did something similar in the game, but in this case he has a regular solid pawn structure. Okay, let's see what happened in the game, and you'll see the difference. So, of course, this was protected. And now he played f4. Now Kramnik played f4. So he's playing on both sides of the board. But you'll see the difference in a second. Excellent move from Topi now. He just doesn't mind that this pawn can be taken. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, he could have played the pawn to h3, but it's really bizarre having this pawn hanging out on h4. But castles is a really good move. I mean, if this pawn is taken, then, well, there's a couple of things that white can do. You could take here, but you could start attacking on the queen side. Anyway, Kramnik played a5, and this is certainly a mistake. because b5 is the move that white wants to play. And now there's too much going on in the position. If this is taken, then the pawn comes to c6, and well, this is even worse than the game continuation. So black is getting tied up on the queen side, but also his king side is a little bit vulnerable. You can play bishop b7 here to try and hold things, but after this exchange, well, let's say knight b6, and the knight comes into e5. You can see that, I mean, these pieces are really poor, and white stands beautifully here, actually. There's going to be trouble on g6. You can just imagine a queen coming out to g4 as well. So after b5, Kramnik took on c5, and then this pawn was taken on c6. The knight really has to retreat here. And then bishop here, defending that pawn, and you can see the only way out for black is to try and get rid of that pawn. But it's not so easy to do that. If queen here, well, very dangerous move in the line of the bishop. Then white takes, and there's already possibilities to sacrifice here, well, particularly if black takes on c6. We'll see something similar in the game. So Kramnik tried bishop a6 and tried to get this pawn, and now Topi took on c5. You can see that black's position is a mess. His king is quite exposed, actually. White's king completely safe. And while black struggles to take back this pawn, Kramnik did, then there's a hit in the middle of the board, and this is disastrous for black. So white manages to exploit the fact that black's king is open and wins back his piece, and now black is utterly lost. In the game, they transpose to an ending. If bishop takes rook, you can see that white can take that rook, and this happened. And here Topalov took on a5. Basically, he's just an extra pawn up, and finally Topi managed to force this pawn home. So a disastrous game for Kramnik, who was completely bamboozled by Topalov's daring strategy with h4 in the opening. Okay, let's move on and take a look at another game. Now the game between Mamedyarov and Svidler. Svidler had a good opening, but somehow he got very confused in the complications. And by this stage, Mamedyarov is on top, no doubt about it. You can see this bishop is around black's king, and white's queen and rook on excellent squares. So basically black's king is exposed, looks rather dubious for black. One would like to sack the exchange and get the queen in here and threaten some kind of nasty mate. But unfortunately white gets there first. That's checkmate. So Svidler came up with an interesting idea. He played rook e6. Now the point is that if the queen retreats, then you sack the exchange and play queen h3. And in this case, this is looking good. Don't forget, there's a bishop that can be taken here as well. I mean, white can actually escape with a draw after this. So this can't be taken because of the check. And after this, the best that black has is a draw, but that's a success, believe me, if you saw Svidler's position. So, going back to this position, remember Svidler has just played rook e6, hitting the queen. Mamedyarov found an excellent reply. First of all, check. So if the king moves, well, we can take this guy off. So this has to be taken. Now rook takes. We've got a mass exchange here. The queen was taken, check, and the king has to move away. So in this position, white could play something like rook takes c7, and, well, white is better, but it's rather unclear actually. Or you could try rook d7. So now the bishop is on prise, and so is the rook. But black has a good reply. Checks and saves both rook and bishop, and again black is all right. But Mamedyarov found a brilliant move, absolutely brilliant. Rook to g5, and after this move Svidler resigned. What's going on? Well, first of all, the rook threatens the bishop, and the rook is attacked. So if the rook moves away, then we play rook takes bishop and win a piece. So, okay, what happens after pawn takes rook? Then we take, so we've transposed into an opposite colour bishop ending, but this is winning for white because of these two passed pawns. Okay, well, first of all, black saves that pawn. White pushes the a pawn. Now you can see that black has to take care of both these pawns, the outside pawns. So black's king has to take care of the h pawn, and the bishop has to take care of this pawn here. So white just wanders the king round, can scoop up this pawn. I mean, you don't, it's not even necessary, but okay, you take this pawn and then you come in, and eventually the king will be able to support the pawn home and win the bishop. And there's nothing that the king can do because it's just tied to defending this pawn. You'll see that white's bishop performs a wonderful role of preventing black's king from taking this pawn, but at the same time guarding the queening square. What a beautiful move from Mamedyarov. And let's have a quick look at Aronian against Andreikin. This is a curious game. Aronian had a massive initiative out of the opening. Andreikin ran short of time. Round about this point, you thought Aronian is just going to win this one really easily. Andreikin has bishop and knight against a rook, but you can see that Aronian's heavy pieces are really active. This knight is out on a limb, so he checks the king. King came here, rook d4, and there are these horrible pins as well. And here Aronian transposed into an endgame, but if he'd held his nerve and just calculated a little longer, he would have seen that bishop e4 is absolutely crushing. I mean, well, it's not too complicated. If this is taken, we can take here. This can't be taken because of queen mate. What else? There's queen c1 check, but king comes to safety. You can see all these pins, and this knight is still just dangling on the edge. It's dreadful for black. Must be winning for white. But instead, Aronian chose to exchange off into an endgame, which did look very good for him. And maybe if he'd taken here with the bishop, he should still have good winning chances after maybe, well, rook a7 or rook a8. Both moves are strong. Not completely winning, but in the game, he said afterwards, oh, I just went mad. And after this, Andreikin hung on to draw the game. This is actually terribly difficult to win now. So, a bit of a disappointment for Aronian. Meanwhile, while all that chaos was going on, Anand played very solidly against Karyakin and drew with the white pieces against the Berlin, which leaves him sitting pretty at the top of the tournament. Anand still leads on his own with 4 points. Aronian is in second with 3.5. And then there's a pack. Kramnik, Svidler, Topalov and Mamedyarov all on 3. Karyakin 2.5. Andreikin 2.